50 years ago, the Beatles performed to a sold-out crowd at Shea Stadium in a concert that many say was the band's greatest. Take a seat and stay glued to your favorite channel dedicated to giving you everything about the Beatles as we take you through the Fab 4 biggest concerts. So make sure to like the video, hit subscribe and that bell notification as we tackle all things Beatles with new videos every week. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr took the stage in Queens, New York as their third and final appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show aired on television. The stadium seated 55,600 fans, a daunting figure that, before that night, was considered many more people than could possibly attend one concert. The thought of filling 55,600 seats at Shea Stadium was absurd. The only rock artist who had played stadiums half the size was Elvis Presley. Still, the Beatles performed not only to a sold-out crowd, but to a deafening stadium full of screaming teenage girls. One of those girls jumped onto the field and stormed toward the stage. Police finally caught her and she was carried away amid a chorus of boos. Leaving festivals like Woodstock and Monterey aside, there is no more famous gig in rock and roll history than when the Beatles played Shea Stadium. Though the Fab 4 found it hard to remember the second occasion, the Beatles actually played Shea Stadium twice. When he was later asked about the second Shea Stadium concert, George Harrison replied, "Did we play Shea twice?" Ringo Starr was asked the same question and gave the same exact response. "Did we play Shea twice?" This is understandable. With the Beatles' extraordinarily eventful career, the excessive drugs taken, and the natural flaws of memory. Another word would probably also apply: anticlimactic. The first Beatles concert is often considered an apogee, some kind of peak in the unique phenomena we know as Beatlemania. After their monumental first Shea concert, the second one just over a year later was surely anticlimactic. The tickets didn't even sell out. The poster at left is for the less memorable second concert at Shea Stadium. The first Beatles concert at Shea Stadium was on August 15, 1965. Any Beatles fan worth their salt knows this one as the Shea Stadium concert. Beatlemania was at one of its highest marks at the Shea concert. Film footage taken at the concert shows many teenagers and women crying, screaming, and even fainting. The crowd noise was such that security guards could be seen covering their ears as the Beatles entered the field. Despite the heavy security presence, individual fans broke onto the field a number of times during the concert and had to be chased down and restrained. Concert film footage also shows John Lennon lightheartedly pointing out one such incident as he attempted to talk to the audience in between songs. The deafening level of crowd noise, coupled with the distance between the band and the audience, meant that nobody in the stadium could hear much of anything. Although the Beatles had sold out countless theatres, local auditoriums, and dance halls, no rock group had played a concert at an actual sports stadium before. The crowd was at capacity with an eye-popping 55,600 fans, mostly screaming, crying, and even fainting women and teenage girls. Interestingly, among the screaming worshipping fans were two future Beatle wives. Both Linda Eastman and Barbara Bach, the future wives of Paul and Ringo respectively, were sitting amongst the other adoring fans. One has to wonder what was going through those girls' minds at the time. The boys were dramatically escorted to the roof of the World's Fair in a whirling helicopter. According to George, en route to the rooftop, the pilot was zipping and whizzing them widely over the Big Apple, pointing out the various sights as the Beatles sat in slight terror at the aerial acrobatics. The boys were then driven to the concert in a Wells-Fargo bank van. After they were deposited at the stadium, each of the Beatles was given his own little Wells-Fargo badge. In the film of the concert, you can spot each Beatle proudly wearing his Wells-Fargo badge pinned to his jacket. Once the previous acts finished their obligatory, thankless performances, the Beatles walked onto the field like four deities. The noise was deafening. In the video footage, some of the security people can be seen putting their hands over their ears or sticking their fingers in their ears to block out the noise. Thousands of bright camera flashbulbs greeted the Beatles as they entered, making the field look like a wild electronics laboratory. The boys nervously picked up their guitars and Ringo climbed aboard his drum kit. They stood in the middle of Shea Stadium, small and distant figures which probably added to the adoration and surrealism of the moment. It was a typically brief Beatles concert, with just 12 songs played in about 30 minutes. The Beatles used their new 100-volt amps, rather like using a portable hand mic to get an interview, and throughout the deafening roar, they couldn't hear a note any of them played. The interviewer asked, "Does it bother you that you can't hear what you sing during a concert?" John Lennon, "No, we don't mind. We've got the records at home." Lennon described the noise as wild, and also twice as deafening when the Beatles performed. On stage, foldback speakers were not in common use in 1965, rendering the Beatles playing inaudible to each other, forcing them to just play through a list of songs nervously, not knowing what kind of sound was being produced or whether they were playing in unison. Because of the excessive noise and the need to somehow keep some kind of a beat, Ringo later confessed to watching the swinger rear ends of his three bandmates to give him some semblance of rhythm. John opened with his version of Twist and Shout, a usual routine, but Paul, George and Ringo all noticed something slightly different about John. According to George, John Lennon cracked up that night. The surrealism of the event caught Lennon's fancy, and always the craziest of the Fab Four, John just lost it. In the video footage, John can be seen cackling and breaking up with mad glee several times, as the other boys look over the crowd and each other with slight disbelief. At one point, John holds his arms outstretched and starts chanting in a Peter Sellers-like voice up at some imaginary heavenly presence above him. At another point, as Paul talks to the crowd, John makes his usual spastic clawed hands impression and stomps his feet. But that was a regular part of John's routine in those pre-politically correct times. During the closing number, as Paul sang "I'm Down," John went over to play the electric organ. Lennon started playing the organ with his elbow and laughing devilishly. The normally staid and conventional Paul is seen doing a full 360-degree spin in seemingly pure exhilaration. Even the usually stone-faced George laughed out loud at John's antics. In between the Twist and Shout and I'm Down bookends, George and Ringo each performed their obligatory solo turns. John and Paul rotated and sang lead in the other 10 songs. Thus, the band played on. And then, the most amazing 30 minutes of condensed music ended in a flash, and the Fab Four trampled off the field exhausted. The concert pulled in a then record gross of $304,000, of which the Beatles would receive half. It was noted at the time as the biggest grossing event in the history of show business. Tickets sold for the ridiculous prices of $4.50, $5 and $5.75. The concert was attended by Mick Jagger and Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones and their manager Andrew Loog Oldham. Afterward, the Beatles spent the evening and part of the next day socialising with Bob Dylan in their suite in the Warwick Hotel. The late John Lennon hailed the Shea Stadium concert as one of his career highlights, telling the band's concert promoter Sid Bernstein, "Sid, at Shea Stadium, I saw the top of the mountain." The Fab Four became so synonymous with the venue that when it was knocked down in 2008, Paul McCartney returned to play the final concert held there. The Beatles in years to come would remark that the music and the roars of the crowd at the Shea Stadium show were so loud that they could barely hear themselves. "I could not hear anything. I'd be watching John's ass, Paul's ass, his foot tapping his head nodding to see where we were in the song," says Ringo Starr in 8 Days a Week. Just how loud was the concert? Research conducted by James Dibble, which provides audio mixing and mastering services and shared with the public, finds that at 131.35 decibels, the sound within the stadium would have been 28 decibels louder than a jumbo jet flying at 100 feet and 11 decibels louder than a crash of thunder. Dibble, who reviewed footage of the Shea concert, said, "It's difficult to calculate an exact sound level of the crowd. However, I can calculate an approximate decibel level. After viewing video footage of the concert and using official dimensions of an American baseball field, I have calculated that the decibel level would have been around 131.35 decibels. Compare that to the current average rock concert sound level of 115 decibels, and you can see how loud it would have been." There you have it all, guys. Drop a thumb up in the comment section. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you've not done that, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. The handles are in the description box below.